Hi everybody, thanks for joining me again for our Bible study. Today we are in 1 Chronicles chapter 13. So we're almost halfway through the book of 1 Chronicles. Thanks for hanging with me, especially through that first part, the first 9 chapters, the genealogy section. Let's talk about chapter 13. Our outline is available for free download on our website. You can get it as a PDF, no strings attached. Link down in the description. When did these events take place? Well, the book of 1 Chronicles was written several hundred years after David, but it records David's reign. David's reign was split into 2 portions. He was king of just Judah for about 7.5 years. Then he was king over Judah and all of Israel for 33 years. So about 40 years and 6 months total. We'll round it off, say 40 years. Who are the key characters in chapter 13? Well, they may look very familiar because this chapter has a parallel in 2 Samuel. In fact, the chapter in 2 Samuel is almost exactly like this one. And so our notes will be very similar. But we've got David, who's the king, and we have a guy named Uzzah. You remember Uzzah? What did he do? He touched the Ark of the Covenant, which no one was allowed to touch. Then we're going to talk about Obed-Edom. The Ark of the Covenant was in Obed-Edom's house for 3 months before it was taken to Jerusalem. More on that in a little bit. This chapter is all about David moving the Ark of the Covenant from its original spot where it had been during the reign of Saul, Kiriath-Jearim, to Jerusalem. You can see Kiriath-Jearim there in the territory of Benjamin, the dark gray. It's all the way over on the west side. It's going to be taken to Jerusalem, which according to our little scale or legend, or I can't remember what that thing's called, distance scale, it's maybe about 9 miles. As we look over at our outline, you'll notice there's only one section because there's only 14 verses. This is somewhat of a shorter chapter. It's really centered around just one event that's being recorded here. Uzzah and the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant was a very holy item which was supposed to sit in the most holy place of the tabernacle. Remember, it was originally built during Moses' time. But the Ark of the Covenant had been neglected during the time of Saul because Saul wasn't really that into following God, probably. David decided to move the Ark of the Covenant from Kiriath-Jearim to Jerusalem, his capital, and he invited the Israelites to gather to celebrate this great occasion. The Ark was transported on a new cart pulled by oxen. Remember that because it's important. The cart was driven by 2 men. One guy's name was Uzzah, and the other guy was Ahio. As this ox-drawn cart went along the road, when they were passing by the threshing floor of Kidon, the oxen stumbled, and Uzzah put out his hand to steady the Ark of the Covenant so it wouldn't fall. God actually killed Uzzah for this, because no Israelite man was allowed to touch the Ark of the Covenant. It was that holy. Uzzah's death killed the celebratory mood, as you might imagine, and David decided to store the Ark of the Covenant in the house of a guy named Obed-Edom instead of taking it all the way to Jerusalem. The Ark stayed in Obed-Edom's house for 3 months, and the text tells us that God blessed Obed-Edom's house during this time. So we see in chapter 13 that David's intention, the people's intention, is very good. They want to respect the Ark of the Covenant, but there's a problem and that God's law is broken in the process, and that's what I want to talk about in our application section. If you're with us for 2 Samuel, notice the application is the same here, but it's because I think a lot of people have this question when they come to this text. And it's about the fate of Uzzah. Weren't his intentions good in trying to steady the Ark? Why does God do this to him? Let's talk about that just a little bit in our application. Was it fair that Uzzah died? Well, we can't get into this too much because we do have a time limit. We can't deal with all the factors that are involved here. But one thing that is often overlooked is that when you're evaluating the fate of Uzzah, you have to realize that Uzzah's fate resulted from a disobedience that preceded him touching the ark. According to God's law, the Ark of the Covenant was never supposed to be transported by wagon. It was to be carried on the shoulders of the priests. Numbers chapter 7, verses 6 through 9. So God specifically stated it was supposed to be moved this way. Later on, David will acknowledge that, he actually made a mistake in doing this. Ignoring God's previous instructions about how the ark was supposed to be transported was what put Uzzah in his dilemma in the first place. Before we accuse God of doing something unfair, if we feel like Uzzah's fate was unfair, we should recognize that if God's commands had been followed in the first place, Uzzah never would have died.